So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight's presentation is how to use U.S. Census records in your genealogy research. So tonight we're going to learn about the purpose of the census, the instructions and methods for the enumerators, and the hidden gems you'll find when reading the entire page. We're going to learn how to put your ancestors' information into historical context with Seema Jane Kenny. Kenny is a professional genealogist and an experienced software instructor. Based on over 20 years of research, her known roots are deep in New England, as well as England, Germany, and Sweden, with DNA now adding a line from the Netherlands. Let's see here. Kenny has a certificate in genealogical research from Boston University. She completed ProGen, and she's an active member of several societies, including a member of the NERGC Planning Committee. Sorry, I'm not up on all my genealogy acronyms. So all 25 of us joining live and the hundreds that are gonna watch this recording, let's give a big round of applause to Seema for joining us here today. And Seema, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Robert, and I love your enthusiasm. I will say I know Tom Toohey, a very entertaining speaker, and yes, even if you don't have Irish genealogy, his stories and his accent are just wonderful to listen to. I've done it many times, even though I have, despite my name, I have no Irish ancestry on my side of the family. You know how that goes, ladies, the married name, and you know, everybody thinks it's yours when it's really not. So I have been doing this for the last 10 years, maybe even a little longer, and even that sounds hard to believe to me. I live in Upton, Mass, so I'm down by the Rhode Island border. But I do have a lot of friends that are up in the Chelmsford, Tewksbury area from various societies. NERGC, which Robert mentioned, stands for the New England Regional Genealogical Consortium. And we have a big conference in New England every 2 years. It's typically in the odd number years, so it's coming up next spring. It's usually in the April, early May timeframe. And of course, because of the situation, we're looking to do it virtually. So if you haven't joined us at a previous conference where lately we've been getting 1,000 people there for 4 days, and oh, we all love to hear about dead people and things, so it's a great group to talk to. You'll find cousins and all kinds of relatives you didn't even know lived right around the corner. We're pulling everything together now for hopefully a really good virtual conference of 2021. And then 2023, we'll be back to Springfield, Mass, where hopefully we can all be there together safely. So tonight is to talk about the U.S. population census, and I purposely said population census because there are other types of census reports. I'm going to save those for another time because there's a lot of them. I just started doing some research this week that told me that there's some of them that they take every year. And boy, I wish I had known about those before. So they're predominantly for Puerto Rico, but hey, if you've got Puerto Rican ancestry, who wouldn't want a census every year? So we're going to talk about the population census reports, why they're created, when they were taken. They're not always on April 1st. We will talk about the types of population reports because there are 3 different versions depending on time frame. Of course, there's always issues with trying to get these reports and get them accurate. But when you look at them, there's also lots of clues in there for you to follow. And for anybody who's just getting started on their family history, because of course, now that you have time sitting around at home and you're talking with relatives and whatever, curiosity mounts, we'll look at, you know, places that you can find the census reports, and I'll talk to you about the different things that they may lead you to. And at the end, we'll give you a list of places where you might look to confirm some of the things you find in those census reports. So the census is pretty easy to find, but unfortunately, it was not really created for genealogy. Don't we wish it was? It does, however, provide a great snapshot of what the nation looked like at 10-year intervals. Almost 10-year intervals, and we'll talk about that too. It's used primarily, its original purpose was to determine representation in the House of Representatives. So we know that that's the one where every state gets different numbers of people depending how much population they have. So they have to count the population in order to determine how many representatives we get. Now, of course, it's just been advertised. We've heard about it's also used for funding and all kinds of other things by the federal government. So here's a document or table here, and it's a little bigger here than it is in your handout, only because I added the last 2 columns yesterday. But the dates of the census. Now we think of it, and obviously look at that, the whole last column all says April 1st. We think of it as April 1st because that's what it's been in our lifetime, but it hasn't always been April 1st. One of these days, I guess it's on my bucket list, I want to go figure out who in the world decided that January was a good time to do a census in 1920. Can you imagine walking around New England in 1920 in January to count all the people that live in your neighborhood? Had to be somebody from Florida, right? Because nobody up here would describe that. So you want to be looking at these dates, and the first 4 columns are in your handout that you can either grab tonight or you'll get in the email. But you want to understand that they're not always 10 years apart. So somebody may age 9 years, they may age 11 years between census reports, and you don't want to just discount that, because you always want to look at the top of the page for what day did they take the census. Think about what you probably just went through, because if you're sitting here thinking about doing your genealogy, I'm sure you all just filled out the 2020 census. They sent it to us like a month ahead, and they wanted to know who was in our house on April 1st. Well, if you did it ahead of time because it came in the mail, you didn't really fill it out for who was there on April 1st because you did it ahead of the 1st. If you wait until after the 1st, depending how long you wait, and sometimes people weren't filling these out for months until months after the date, you may forget. Oh yeah, wait, the baby wasn't born yet. Or, oh, grandma died right before that date, not right after that date. So there are going to be some discrepancies in what was recorded. So 3 types of population schedules that you want to be aware of. And I'm going to describe them coming forward from the first census, and then the ones we look at, we're going to work backwards. So from 1790 to 1840, which would be the first 5 censuses, it was only the heads of household. So it's going to be predominantly men. Sorry, ladies, but this is history. Predominantly men's names, and then it's going to have little counts or little tick marks for how many people fit in various categories depending on what year the census was taken. The categories changed every census, and we'll look at that as we get further back into the presentation. But they were counting up men, women, slaves within certain age categories. So the first census we really want to look at for our genealogy is really the 1850 census. Well, not the first we want to look at, but the furthest back we want to definitely get to is 1850, because from 1850 to 1930, we have all the individuals listed. So if you've got a family with grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and a bunch of children living there, maybe an in-law, whatever, they're all listed, unlike the earlier ones. And they're listed with a whole lot of different information because every 10 years, they ask different questions. Now, 1940 to 2010, I won't speak to the 2020 because I haven't figured out for sure what they're going to show us yet. But from 1940 on, the person who answered the questions is actually indicated on the form. Yay! As my husband will tell you from, if he remembers, from 8 years ago when I started looking at the 1940 census, yes, that tells you who lied. Because let's face it, we know they didn't all tell the truth. And the first 10 censuses I looked for 1940, that's all I talked to. Oh, this one lied about that, and that one lied about this, and but that's okay, because that tells you other things too. Now, instead of every person getting asked all the questions, and you may remember this from the ones you just did, you have to fall, in 1940, your name has to fall on a certain line, and then you're going to be asked additional questions. So we'll take a look at where to find that information as well. And of course, there is no guarantee that your ancestors are on every single census. People were moving around, people did not get counted. We know that there are errors. On the other hand, there are people who got counted twice. I think it's a 3 times great-grandmother who was counted twice, 3 days apart in 2 different states. She was at her parents' house, and then she was at her brother's house in Massachusetts. And oh, there's a train line that runs between the 2. I know it was her, but they obviously did not answer the questions properly because she could not have been in 2 places at the same time. We also want to make sure this is a really big exercise in making sure we know what those geographic borders were. Towns don't necessarily pick up and move, but state and county borders can move around a town. So you may end up with a town that has been in different counties. You may even end up with a town that has been in different states, depending on which year's census you're looking for. So if you're looking at anything that's near borders, you want to make sure you consider the history of that area and what other areas you might look to when you don't find them where you expect to find them. Of course, they could change their name in between, because you could do that easily in those days. Just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Susan. And, you know, if you don't have a picture ID in your purse or your pocket, nobody's going to necessarily question what you tell them unless you are walking around with a big sign that says you're a liar. The early censuses, there were many copies made. Copies were made by hand, which means there's errors. You know for a fact, you know, if you copy something from one page of notes to another page or something, there can be errors. There can simply be errors in how somebody reads the handwriting. I's look like E's, A's look like O's. It happens all the time. Of course, depending on who's giving the information, if it was a neighbor, they may not know your legal name. They may only know the nickname that you go by. They may not know all the right information about where you were born and where your parents were born, but they might give it a good try. And there was no guarantee, if you think back to how grandma and maybe even your parents used to handle pieces of paper, anybody that lived through the Depression, you know, they used every scrap of that paper. There was no rule about the family had to be on the same page. So if you're looking for people and you're at the bottom or the top of a page, make sure you go back and forth to get that whole family picture in one place. So there's lots of different categories of information on the population censuses, and these are most of them. They don't show up on every single census, but location will, civil condition, as far as whether or not they're married, would show up on all of them. Other times you get information about occupation, you get some information about their health. Now that's usually whether they're deaf, dumb, blind, or insane, depending on what those terms meant at the time. You can get information about education, about where they were born, whether or not they're citizens or aliens. Possibly get information on whether they own a home, how much their home is worth, and whether they served in the military. So these are all things I'm going to show you where to look for on some of these census reports to find this, and then at the end give you some other places to look to make sure that what's on that census is really accurate. So every census, this happens to be in 1880, and it happens to be a version that came out of Ancestry, so it's nice and neatly typed and all of that. But every census at the top is going to have geographical information. And this is where you want to be looking and saying, okay, what state, what county, what city was this? You can go look it up on a map. You can get a chance to see where those borders are. If it's a large enough city, it's going to list an enumeration district. So if you're looking up for something certainly like a New York City, nobody was going to do the entire city. They had to divide it into small blocks. As a matter of fact, most of the blocks that they divided it in were meant to have less than 2,000 people in them. So there are separate maps that would show you where those districts are within a city. And then of course, the really important part at the top of any census to look at is the enumeration date. What date the questions were asked and answered. It doesn't matter what was on that chart I showed you. Yes, okay, it was supposed to be as of January, 5th or whatever it was in 1920. But if they didn't answer the questions until March, because that's when the person could get through the freaking snow in Maine to get to them, right? It's going to have a March date there, and that may play into how people answered those questions. Again, are they going to tell you what was going on in January, or are they going to tell you what's going on today? So this would be something for every census that you look at. And the most recent census that we can look at for this information is the 1940. So that's why most of these slides will talk about 1940 and backward. So here's a sample of a 1940 census, and all the samples I'm using tonight are from my own family, and I'm going to give you a magnified version of this in a second, but I just wanted you to get a chance to see what the full page looked like. So all those little orange circles I just put there, those are highlighting places where there's an X inside of a circle, and that tells me who answered the questions. Okay, the top one is my grandmother answered, then my great-grandmother answered, and all their neighbors, I can tell who answered the questions. These yellow rectangles are showing you, the people online, what is it on this page, 55 and 68. Those are the people who are going to get asked extra questions, and their answers to those extra questions are down at the bottom. So those are the ones that you're hoping, oh, jackpot, if my ancestors land on that page, that line, I get more information. Mine never do, but maybe yours will. If mine don't, somebody has to. So here's a little blow up of the top of that, just the part that relates to my family. So again, I circled in orange the little X's that show who answered the questions. And I'm just kind of going across the top here. I've got information on their location, the household. I've got their name, relationships. So I want to be reading down that column of relationships. Maybe there's a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law in here, a granddaughter or something. That would be important to know as far as documenting a relationship. I've got some personal description, education, place of birth. And on this bottom part, which is really the right-hand side of the paper here, oh, whoops, forgot about this one. Here's my great-grandparents. They're both listed as AL for alien. Okay, so under citizenship, they listed and said they were aliens. I'm not convinced that's true, but that's okay. They flip-flopped. So, and then I've got on this second half here, persons 14 and older only. So this extra blank spot here, that's my father and his younger brother. They were less than 14, so they didn't have to answer questions about schooling and health and occupation. They were too young. So just because you see blanks in there, you don't want to assume, oh, they just didn't answer the question. No, let's go back and look at their ages. Did I highlight them here? Yeah. So they're 10 and 7, therefore they didn't have to answer those questions or have them answered for them. So here's a 1930. Again, this is a full page just so you get a feel for what it looks like. And each one of these, I'm going to kind of talk to you about different parts of the census that are important to look at. So here's one where that's my grandmother on line 1 underneath the big red circle with her 2 children that were born before 1930. But you notice that the person underneath there at the bottom of the circle, there's 2 numbers, and there's no numbers next to my grandmother's name. Well, that's because her husband, with all the good information as the head of household, ended up on the last line of the previous page. So, oh, I can't see it because your pictures are in the way, but so here's the 2 different pages for that census. And here's the information about my family. So those 2 numbers, one of them tells me, let me go backwards here. One of those 2 numbers, just make it bigger so everybody can see, tells me the number of the dwelling, which is just houses in order. What order is this of the houses that this person, the enumerator, has gone to? The second number, and these happen to match, but they won't always, the second number is which family is this? If I count just the families I've gone to, what number am I up to? Just consistent, consecutive numbers. When they don't match, and we'll look at some examples in a little bit, that will give you some information about their housing. So let's go back to this one here. And all right, so here's a blow up. So on this one in 1930, I happened to blow up and concentrate here on looking at their house information. So here's two columns. The first one has an O or an R, depending on whether they own or they rent. And then the next number, which is actually dollars, tells me either what the value is or what they pay in monthly rent. So if you look down towards the bottom, there's somebody down there who's paying $25 a month to rent a house that has at least 4 people in it. My grandfather's house, which he built himself, is at the bottom of that top page there. He owns the house and he claims it's worth $10,000. His neighbor's house is worth $5,000, and then the next neighbor's is worth $12,000. So here I can get an idea of what the neighborhood is like. If you went through and you saw all the houses are pretty much valued at the same amount, you might think, oh, okay, it's probably row houses, you know, they probably all look the same. I've been to this house. I know exactly what this house looks like as well as what some of these others are like. So I know this is a very non-homogeneous neighborhood. Do I trust those numbers? Let me tell you, if somebody came to my house and said to me, well, what's the value of your house? I haven't a clue. I can tell you what we paid for it 30 years ago, but I don't know what the value is. So I'm not necessarily trusting these numbers, but it does give me an idea of what's going on in the area. Of course, if I know they own a house, I got to go look at the tax records, because that'll tell me something about what they've done with the house. I'm also going to want to look at real estate records to see when did they buy it, who did they sell it to, where did they get a mortgage from, all kinds of neat information in there. Also in the 1930, now here's one that says, asks if you're a veteran. Of course, this page, everybody said no. But if they had said yes, it also asks in the next column, what war or expedition were you in? And if anybody had said yes, that would be a big hint to go look for their service records, their pension file, anything more you could learn about their military service. Doesn't mean they really did it, but might as well at least look for it. Whoop. There we go. So 1920, and again, you can see that these are all, they're full, you know, 11 by 17 pages, which is one of the reasons you don't want to try to print them on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. They really don't look too well then, unless you've got lots of magnifying glasses. This one is actually from Maine, but again, just to give you the feel of, you know, what's it going to look like as we're looking at a full page and looking for just the neighborhood, not just our ancestors. So in this case, you know, look at this. Where were you born? Where was your father born? Where was your mother born? Maine, 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 Maine. This is probably an area where, as I'm looking at my ancestors that are on this page, I probably can make a note of their neighbors and decide that their neighbors might live nearby them again in 1910. They may still live near them in 1930. If I was looking in a city and I saw that a lot of this said, you know, Ireland or England or Germany or something, I might look for and say, oh, that maybe was a very ethnic neighborhood, and maybe that gives me a feel for the celebrations and things that might have gone on in the neighborhood. In this case, it is telling me, you know, these people may have lived together for a long time, and that might be a clue for some other records and things that I might want to look for as well. So 1910, again, we're looking at a big full page. This is my father's mother's side. So once we get out of Connecticut, we're into Maine for years and years and years. I think all the way back to the 1790 census, they're still in Maine. They were in Massachusetts, but that was before the censuses were taken. So again, I've got a nice full page. I've got information at the top on where this was taken, what date it was taken, the 3rd and 4th of May of 1910. I don't remember what the date for the census was in 1910, but here we are taking it. Oh, if I look at the handout, it was for April 15th was supposed to be the census date. So this is about 3 weeks later. That's probably not too bad. So here's one of the things I find on this one. It actually has something in that very first column. It was written in the opposite direction, but it has the name of the road. Now I can definitely pull out a map because I've got an actual road name, not just an area. 1900, you can see the paper's changed a little. It's not quite 11 by 17 anymore. This one, it prints okay on an 8.5 by 11, but you might still need a magnifying glass to read a lot of it. Obviously, we're asking less questions. If you think back, when the census first started, the first census in 1790 was actually administered entirely by President George Washington. Can you imagine any president in your history having the time to manage the census every 10 years? I mean, there wasn't as much for them to do. So, and they didn't know enough to ask all these other questions. They also didn't have technology to ask questions about and things. So 1910, we've got a few less questions, but we've got a lot of information in here about homes and education, occupations and things. So the one I picked this for to show out was that last column at the very right-hand side. The heading of it says number of farm schedule. Now, a farm schedule is another type of census that was taken. And what the census taker enumerator would have to do when they were there, if you said you lived on a farm, and look at that column 27 right next to it, I don't know, those barely look like F's to me. The one at the top is an H right under the 27, and all the rest are F's. But boy, they don't really look like F's, except that since there's a number filled in, I know there's an F for farm. On the farm schedule, and I'll show you one on the next slide, it's going to tell you an awful lot about that farm. How many people were there, how many animals were there, what kind of crops they did, what they sold, what they kept. Absolutely amazing information about the working of their farm if you can find the farm schedule. They don't all exist, and that's one of the issues, of course, with all these old documents, but if it does, for instance, the one the blue arrow is pointing to, it's line 27. If you were to find the farm schedule for this town, in this county, in this state for 1900, whatever that family is on line 59 of this page would be on line 27 of the farm schedule. So you have a link there to tell you exactly where to look to make sure you're looking at the right information. And here's, again, a computerized copy, but they call it an agricultural census. So this is the farm schedule. This one happens to be from 1880. But if we look across, you can see that, okay, they're going to give us a name. They're going to tell us how many acres of land they have. What's the value of the farm, of the products, of the livestock? How much fence do they have? How much labor? How much of it is grasslands? And then on the bottom hand, we're going to talk about, what kind of meat, cattle, sheep did you have, poultry? What did you have on hand as of the census date? And we don't care just about how many, cows or horses or whatever. Sometimes we care how old they are. We care whether they're male or female animals. We got all kinds of things on here that we might want to find out about someone's farm. Unfortunately, they're not as easy to find as we'd like them to be. So 1890, I'm not going to tell you not to look for it, but read the bottom part. Unfortunately, we did have that war, a couple of wars. There was a fire in the Department of Commerce in 1921. If the fire didn't destroy the census, the water did. Paper and water don't mix too well, and it doesn't mix with fire either. So you've got some existing pieces for the states that are listed here, and you'll notice that none of them are in New England. So me, who has all New England ancestry, I just assume the 1890 is gone. I really have no reason to look for it in any of these other places. So unfortunately, that means that if we're tracing the census backwards, we're going to have to make a 20-year jump from 1900 to 1880. Now, as you continue your genealogy education, you are going to find there are plenty of people out there who will talk and give presentations about how to find things that fill that 20-year gap. When you don't have the census, the national census, what else can you use? So I'm not going to get into that at this point. I just want to make you aware that you shouldn't be hunting for this needle in a haystack, because the needle probably doesn't exist. And there's nothing worse than searching for something and then finding out, oh, you were never going to find it because it's not there. I'd rather spend my time searching for something that I might find. So as we get back to 1880, now, so this is one of the first ones with heads of household, or sorry, with full families. But you can see again, it's much smaller. They're not asking a whole lot of questions. This one was done on the 28th of June, I think it says. Again, it's up in Maine. Now, one of the things this did ask, and they do tend to ask this on almost all of them, what's your occupation? Again, as you're reading these, read through the whole page, because it will get you used to their handwriting. That very first one, I mean, we're looking at occupation, which is column 13. That first one, again, I thought it said learner when I first looked, but it says farmer. I don't know, the F has got a foot on it, not just the, middle, it's got a foot at the bottom as well. The more you look at it and the more you read through the whole page, the more comfortable you're going to get with this person's handwriting and their spelling. So you're going to start to understand better what you're looking at. So when I look at these occupations, not just these old ones, but even the 20s, 30s, and 40s, I want to be thinking about, was there an association for this occupation? Was there an apprenticeship? Is there going to be something that might be a history book? Certainly somebody who is a stone cutter, there might be a history of stone cutting in the United States, and it might tell me something about what that job was like. I may have the advantage of being able to look for a license or pensions, union records, depending on what their occupation was. And those are going to fill me in on more details. I want to get, as much as I can about all these different aspects of their lives. So 1870, again, nice and skinny. Look at this one. Everybody's born in Maine. No questions asked. Very little tick marks. Not too many questions asked. But let's take a look at some of this education, health, and constitutional relations part here. So education. Now, this one happens to be the one that asks in the negative. You see, there it's education, it's columns 16 and 17, but it says cannot read, cannot write. All the other censuses say can read, can write. So if you're tracing an ancestor through the census, you want to make sure you're understanding what question they were asking, because I don't want you to think that, oh, all of a sudden, it's the reverse. It is the reverse because they asked the question backwards. But if they're going to school, in New England, we have town reports that go back. You can look at a school board report. You can see what you might find about what the schools were like. I actually had somebody, very distant relative, that ended up living for 20 years in the town next to me, moved down from Maine, moved back to Maine, so I didn't even think to look for them in Massachusetts. I went over to the town next to me, looked at their town reports from that time frame, post-Civil War, and I found their children all listed in the Department of Education report because they had perfect attendance at school. which in a farming community was a big issue. The kids didn't go to school because the parents needed them to work the farms. So they were trying to bolster and promote people that went to school all the time. You know, those 6-week semesters that they had to go, and they'd get written up. Perfect attendance for the full semester. And then you read later, you're like, oh, it's 6 weeks. Okay, they went to school for 6 weeks straight. Got it. This one on health, I just put it so that you could still read it, whether they're deaf, dumb, blind, insane, or idiotic. Now, these are terms I would want to look up possibly in a law dictionary, because they tend to be able to tell you what the term meant at a certain date. Deaf, dumb, blind, probably not an issue, but insane or idiotic, we know those terms have changed over the years, the meaning of those terms. So we probably want to check those out a little bit when we see a yes in there or something, and not panic until we know what it was. 1870, this one happens to give you an extra question about males. So if we're looking at, you know, are they a citizen or are they not a citizen? Now, 1870 would be pretty early to be thinking about too much with a lot of immigration or naturalization, but that column number 20, if you're 21 years old and male, do they have the right to vote? Well, if they say yes in there, that's a good hint as to their citizenship, possibly their naturalization, depending on when they were born, where they were born. So these are all little clues to kind of pick up as you go along. Now, we're going to get back to some very nasty looking ones soon. Here's 1860. So we've still got full families, but it's a very tiny list. Not too many questions at all here. We've basically got age, we've got gender, we've got occupation, couple little things about their homes. Whoops, I thought I had a blow up of that one. I guess I didn't. Couple things about the value of their real estate and then the value of their personal estate. Again, take it with a grain of salt. If the census taker knocks on your door and says, what's the value of your personal estate? You don't know this person from a hole in the wall. Back then they probably did. It was probably their neighbor, but you know, you don't know the person. You can fluff up your peacock feathers and say you have a huge estate, or you might say, no, I don't have anything, because, you know, if you tell the guy you have a lot, they might come back to rob you. We do have place of birth and a little bit of other information. So now we're back into heads of household. Oh, sorry, not quite yet. I keep wanting to get back there. 1850. So here we've got an indication here of a boarding house. They were nice enough to actually write in there that the reason that there were 17 people in this one house is that it was a boarding house. Okay, it's not 17 people squished into 2 rooms, because that's a whole different picture, right? And this is where I also want to talk to you about those 2 numbers. I told you that these were going to be consecutive. You know, this is dwelling 25, dwelling 26, but it's family 31 and 32. Well, family 32 doesn't have a dwelling number next to it, which would lead me to believe that dwelling number 25 is a multifamily home. Okay, there's 2 different families in there, possibly right and left, maybe, you know, first and second floor, however they split the home. But I'm going to get out a map. I'm going to check, you know, Google Maps. I'm going to check Zillow, which is a real estate site, and see if I can find a copy of a picture of the house. This might be pushing my luck. But it's another hint to you on what type of housing that they had. So here's for the older censuses, 1840 to 1790. Now this is going to give you some idea of the age brackets. If we start at the very bottom, which is the 1840, right, we've got age brackets of 0 to 4, 5 to 9, basically every 5 to 10 years or so. But if we jump up to the very first one in 1790, well, we only counted the males as far as under 15 and over, 16 and over. We don't care what age the females are. Of course not. The females are not going to be in the military. The boys 16 and over are going to be in the military if we need them. so we're going to count them. Then we have free people and we have slaves. 1800, you can see that they want a little bit more with the age brackets now. They're counting both sexes, which is a good thing. And the age brackets have kind of changed. So I made this chart because if you find somebody who's got, 2 males in the 0 to 15 bracket on the 1790, you need to be able to figure out, well, what bracket are they going to be in on these other censuses? Because they don't all line up. It's not like they said every 5 years, every 10 years or anything for consistency. Because consistency out of the government, a little too much to ask for. So even when they were this young. So here's a sample. Again, this is my family from the 1840 census. This is one up in Maine. Very hard to even put a ruler and read straight across for where everybody is. Back at this point, you may find that some of these censuses are put in alphabetical order by last name. Absolutely useless if you're trying to figure out who lived next door, unless you happen to know that everybody in the neighborhood had the same last name. 1830, not too bad, but I can hardly read the headings, but that's okay. At least mine's at the tippy top of the page. But here's one where people are in alphabetical order, or close to it. At least all the A's are together and then all the B's together. Yeah, does not help me with those neighbors that I want to know about. 1820, we're getting really crooked. I'm not sure I've got the right things highlighted as far as the one that I think is my ancestor, but I also have no column headings. So I don't know what these numbers are. I mean, I can read them. They're 1s and 2s. There's a couple 3s in there, but I don't know what they're counting because I don't have headings. Doesn't mean I can't get them. I just don't have them. Here's an 1810. Again, at least the photocopy or the microfiche copy, whatever it is extremely crooked here. I'm reading uphill and no headings. 1800, again, still my family. I kind of found them in the middle there. It would be nice to have some headings at the top. I think I'm pretty sure I know that everything to the left of the double line there is males, to the right is females, but it's an educated guess when I'm looking at it. Now here's 1790. Notice there's 4 columns of names. It's not even just one big column. I get back here and I've got a column of names and I've got 3 numbers after them. And I've got some totals at the bottom of the pages and whatever. So very little information if you get back to the 1790 census. So how am I going to know what some of those column headings should be? Well, I can get copies, printed, typed copies of what these forms look like from several different websites. I can get them from Ancestry.com. I can get them from FamilySearch.com. And if you're just getting started with research, or you're having issues because you can't get to the Ancestry Library Edition at the Tewksbury Library, for those of you that are local, FamilySearch.org is free 100% of the time. So it's not a bad place to get started. Ancestry there's nothing wrong with Ancestry, but you do have to pay if you're not in the library. So I'm a frugal New England person. I want to save money wherever I can. So we can get these. You can also get these from the Census Bureau. Here's one from the National Archives. Again, it's easier to read. Some people, when they're doing their census research, they like to find the census report, but they also like to have this version handy and then transcribe it themselves so they know exactly what fits in each of the columns. So where am I going to find these census reports? Well, I can find them on Ancestry. That's a subscription. I might find them on findmypast.com, which is also a subscription. FamilySearch.org, I just mentioned, is a free site to look them up. Genealogy Library, HeritageQuest.com That one you can still get to from the library, because I'm pretty sure that one allows you to use it from home. Just put in your library card. Your local historical societies, genealogy libraries. So I know you had Melanie was talking from New England Historical Genealogical Society in Boston. They have copies of census reports. State archives will. The really old census reports, the heads of household ones, they're copies everywhere. They're published in books. So historical societies, libraries tend to have those. But of course, if you don't know who you're looking for, that's great. They're easily available, but you have no idea who you're looking at. Although they can be really interesting to just look and say, well, how many people in the town have the same last name, or how many do I think are related? There's all kinds of neat little projects you can do with those old ones. Now, when we're looking for census reports, right? Let me see. When we're looking for census reports, we want to remember that the most recent one we can look at is 1940, and that's because they're kept private for 72 years. So you're starting at a great time, because in less than 2 years, April 1st of 2022, the 1950 census will become public. Now, don't jump up and down, because just because it's public doesn't mean that on April 1st, 2022, you're going to find all your ancestors on the 1950 census. When the census is first published on April 1st, it will not be indexed. And the only way to look things up is going to be by knowing the state, the county, and the city, and if necessary, the enumeration district of your ancestors in order to find the right page. On the other hand, if you want to help out the genealogical community, it's a great time to volunteer to index the census, and then be one of those people who's transcribing the names. You might even find there's going to be quite a few that are typed, which is really great if you're trying to transcribe them, and create that index for everybody to use. When the 1940 census came out, it took people about 2.5 to 3 months to get the entire thing indexed. So it's going to take at least that long for 1950, because every census there's more and more names to write down. So here's some ideas of places that you would look to confirm the things that you find in the census. We know that that's how people answered the question. What we don't know is, did they tell the truth or not? These are all listed on the back side or the second page of your handout, so you don't have to hurry up and try to write them all down or anything. But, you know, we want to be out at looking in the cemeteries. We want to be looking at land records. We want to be looking at military records, service records, school reports, town reports, tax lists, talking to your assessors, talking to your town clerks, town officials, to get more facts to back up what people said on the census. Whoops, wrong direction. So we know that not everything's 100%. We do want to read everything that's there. We want to make sure that, you know, we're getting all the information off the page we can. Make sure you know where to find it, so in case you need to go back to it, you can get it. Sometimes we want to pay attention to what's not there. You know, who's not there, or what questions didn't get answered? What did they decide to not quite admit to? We need to have a good understanding of the time of the census. You know, what was going on in history at that time? The 1930 census, they ask about, do you own a radio? Why would the government care if you own a radio? Well, up until then, they had no mass communication to talk to the people. You know, how are they going to get the news out? They're looking to say, is there enough people that have a radio in their house that it's worth doing something like, you know, Roosevelt's, was it Roosevelt, I think, that did the fireside chats, whoever it was. You know, if there were only 10 people in the country that had a radio, then doing a radio broadcast wasn't really a good use of somebody's time. One of the things that you might decide to do, if you're crazy like me, the sheets that show the questions, or at least a list of the questions. A list of all the enumerator instructions is available at this website that's at the bottom of the screen here. And I'm pretty sure this one's also on your handout. Oh yeah, it is. It's on the back page. You can go here, and I forgot to take it off my bookshelf, but somewhere back there behind me, I have a big thick notebook where I actually printed all these and put them in a notebook because I was using them so often. You can read about what were the enumerators supposed to do. These are just the instructions, mind you. We don't know what they really did or if they really followed the instructions. But there is one, I believe it's the 1920 census, where they were actually told, if someone says they're from this country, write down this answer. All right, if you think about 1920s in Europe, we've got a lot of things going on with who's taken over what countries and whatever. They were trying to, you know, consolidate things the best they could. So if you find somebody and you're like, they never lived in that country, this may or may not be them, it might be time to go look at those directions and make sure that it wasn't one of those where they were told, if they say A, write B. And it's actually a much bigger list than that. So there's a lot to learn, a lot to do with the census. But the nice thing is you can find them fairly easily, and they will give you a lot of information about your family. So let me see if I have, oh, good. I thought maybe I didn't put this in here. So I'm going to just walk you real quickly. I'll walk you through what I did with my great-grandfather. John William was born in this country. He was the first in that line of my family to be an American citizen. He was born in 1879. Phew. He made the 1880 census. I didn't have to wait till 1900 for him to show up. I actually know him from growing up. He was around until I was about 12 years old. So in order to find out things I didn't know about him, this is my 3 steps I did. I found all his census reports, all right, the ones I could so far anyway. And then I took notes. And when I took notes from the census, I took notes on, okay, what's the date? What's the day they answered the questions, right? I have my other little chart for what was the census date, but here I have the date that they actually answered the questions. And then I would write down everything I could about what I got off of that piece of paper, checking every column for anybody that was in that family. So you can see there 1940, I've got, you know, here's his wife, she's female, white, 59, they're married, she's not going to school. Gee, surprise, huh? 59, she didn't go to school. It tells me she went to high school and was born in New York. And then there's some information for a couple of their children. Once I had my notes, I started to write up their story. And this is not their full story, but this is their census story. So what I learned from the census was, okay, John William was born in February of 1879, because there is one census that asks you for the month and year of your birth. I know his parents' names. I know he got married somewhere around 1901, and he married some woman named Meta. Well, I know a lot more than that about Meta because she was around till I was 10. And then I wrote like a paragraph for each of the censuses that he showed up in. Well, the first 2 got combined because, you know, he was only 20 years old at 1900. And I just made notes. How many children did they have? Did they own their home? Did they not? What was their occupation? I'm just putting a quick story together that is full of holes. Because I knew, you know, I had his. I finished out with the 1940. I listed all his children. And then because I had his from when he was a child, I had this little teeny bit of information about my great-grandparents. So I might as well, while I'm there, write those up. Now there's a lot of things missing in here. But that's good. It's always good to know what it is you don't yet know. So things like, oh, I don't have a full birth date. Gee, I don't know Meta's last name. I don't know Sarah's last name. Of course not, because on the census, they're with their husband's name. I don't know their maiden name yet. So now I can make a list. What do I need to look at? What are the holes I need to fill? exact date and place of births, date and place of marriage, why did they move or when did they move. I know that he's in 2 different towns. Actually, there was a 3rd town in between that didn't hit the census. How come they sold their home and started renting? It's depression. I have some ideas, but addresses. These are just the tip of the iceberg of things that came out of those stories that were the holes to be filled. All right, so I encourage you to read all the census reports, take some notes, start writing your story, because it will help you to focus your research. If you know what you need to research, you'll be researching that and not re-researching something you already know about. So Robert, I'm ready for questions. I'm sure there are at least